Some sports are stressful and others aren't so stressful. It just depends. I never understood the game of golf until I lived a block from a golf course. And I got to sneak on in the evenings and walk my dog. And I thought, gosh, this is a beautiful place. Because they're always well maintained. You can look at the patterns of the grass, right? And they're often really peaceful. What throws it for a loop is when people start getting into their heads around the game of golf, right? So that then flips it the other direction. What else? You're doing great.
People with kids and children, sometimes just playing with their children.
Play. When was the last time you played? We ought to add that to the list too. Play, right?
Play.
Yeah. So then we can expand that list like an accordion file, right? And drop in some different things around play. Got ideas for play? Great with kids, because then we have this thing called play therapy that is what's important for working with kids, right? Because talk therapy doesn't necessarily help with kids. They're not as verbal and able to put verbal and unconscious information together. Okay. So how do you like to play?
I like to play board games at our house.
Board games.
Board games.
Yeah. Different kinds of board games. Anybody play? I know there are all kinds of apps, right? There are apps for Angry Birds. Stressful or not so stressful?
Depends on the level.
Depends on the level, right? Depends on your focus. So it depends. So anything that could be self-care could also have the other side to it, depending on the attitude that you bring to it as well. I've got different apps that are for meditation, and I'll share one tomorrow with that too. So emotions, how about emotions? How in the world do you start discharging those emotions? Crying, and actually there's research that says that there's a difference in the tears that we shed from sadness versus the tears that we shed from joy even. So yeah, it's also about being authentic and in alignment. If I feel sad, then cry, and I do that. And anybody ever heard of laughter therapy? Right? Yeah, so it's just starting to laugh, and there's a structure often to it to start out with, but that's part of play and engaging all kinds of muscles as well. All right.
Bugs Bunny helps me with that.
Say again?
Bugs Bunny.
Bugs Bunny.
Cartoons.
So you've heard of different studies too that talk about humor as a therapeutic tool. So you can take a look at different kinds of humor that could work for you and for anybody else that you might be working with too. What else?
Okay, this is going to go out there, but I'll be going.
We like out there. It's okay.
I'm going to go. I'm not a person that does this, but I've always wanted to create a place where you can go and safely break dishes, and then you take those dishes and make them to a mosaic art.
Oh, that's great.
Because then you can create from it.
Yeah.
I myself am not a person who breaks things. I sometimes wish I was.
Right.
But because I do think it releases a lot. Like one time my husband had to do a project where he had to photograph something, and I got to break glasses with a hammer, and I'm like, are you kidding me? This is fantastic. So, I'm down breaking glasses and they're shattering, and he needed to capture the shatter.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I got to break so many things because they didn't break just right or something, and it was fantastic. It was such a release.
There is some.
And it was an emotional release.
Yes, so mental.
It was not a body thing.
Right.
It was an emotional release.
You really felt a difference when
I felt a difference.
broke things.
Yeah,
Dishes.
One time I pushed all these papers off a desk when I was mad, and it felt so good. And then I bent down and picked up all the papers and put them back on a desk. But it was the only time I've ever done that. But it felt so good.
And
I didn't destroy anything.
There's that element of being just kind of out of control there when you're breaking stuff on purpose. It's interesting. I didn't even include in my list. I worked at. I did an internship at Sweetbriar College, an all-women's school in Virginia, and the campus minister at the time was in a house on campus that had a basement, a brick basement that had a. You know where I'm going with this? Do you know where I'm going with this? She would go to yard sales and get dishes from yard sales. And she had an open invitation to all the students and staff on campus to come and break dishes. Her one rule is, as long as you clean it up. So she had stacks of dishes and this brick wall that not everybody, but a few people took her up on. I thought that was an awesome idea.
And then going a step further is making it into art.
And then taking, sort of that transformative of taking all these broken pieces, the shattered pieces, and turn them into something that's creative art, whether that's the tabletop or stepping stones or something else. Yeah, so that combines a couple of different processes too. And you might break that down into smaller steps. Like today, I'm going to break dishes. Looking forward to that one, right? Yeah. How about spiritual approaches? Prayer. Prayer cuts across almost every spiritual tradition, absolutely. And there are different ways to pray as well. What else?
Nature is very spiritual.
There's that nature again, yeah. And meditation also cuts across a variety of spiritual traditions. There are, and here we go, we can open up this accordion file around meditation. I actually have an app that has 52 different kinds of meditations on it. That's a lot of meditations. You have a favorite meditation? And you may not. But one thing I would, one that's a sort of meditation that goes into guided imagery. I want to equip you with this one because it works for all kinds of clients and it will be helpful for you. And that is finding a mental safe place. So a safe place, that's often used with EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing as a technique, as an intro technique to help people be able to stop flooding themselves from any kind of trauma. But safe place is about really thinking first about a place that you feel the most safe. It should be a place that is your space. And it can be anywhere. It can be outside, it can be inside. A lot of people find places outside, but it can be inside. I had one client whose safe place was her closet, but that's so it's individual. And then the next step is to really not just imagine yourself in it from here on the visual. This is where guided imagery is sort of a misnomer in that you also then start hearing sounds from the place, not just seeing, but having whatever the sensation that helps to create that safety, and then tuning in to the feeling of safety. So I would suggest that you do a little bit of reading. There's so much information that's out there on the internet too about safe place. And that could be one of your tools for yourself, but also teaching clients as well. How about breath work? Anybody ever do any breathing kind of related stuff? Lots of different, again, there's another accordion file around breath work. Breath work requires that focus that I was talking about before. and being in the present. Those two are a pretty powerful combination. All right, so what else in terms of spiritual or emotional or... You're doing great. How are we doing on time? Good.
I think finding a way to say what you're feeling without it being threatening to other people is huge in that. But
Yeah.
easier said than done.
Being able to first, so going with the emotional aspect really requires identifying different parts to it. So number one, how am I feeling? Being able to label the feeling. And what I've been doing more and more with clients is asking them where do they feel it in their bodies. Because that starts to anchor it in. It's not just a concept of I'm feeling angry, it's where do you feel this in your body? And then we can start working with that. I do some breath work related to emotions as well, and where emotions are stuck in the body, and how to move them, how to allow them to move, not forcibly making them move. How's everybody doing? I'm going to pull out a deck of cards here that I created about, I have to remember, what year was that? About 4 years ago. I myself was in a really difficult place, and I have a couple of decks that I'm happy to give away. I was going to have people sort of, I have a number in mind, and I'll give away a couple of decks. But the original deck was created because, like I said, I was really in a difficult place, and I had a really hard time sorting through all kinds of things. And it was a holiday weekend, so I had a 3-day weekend. And I heard myself say, you know what, Susan, you know, you've been doing this counseling thing for a long time. You have tools. Where did that come from, right? And so right away I saw a template for laying out tools on my computer. So I went to my computer feeling really, I mean, I was really, I'm sobbing, and I sat down and I just started writing. So here's that writing part. When I was done, and I had come up with over 70 different tools and strategies that I had come across over the years that I had worked as a counselor. So what I did is I created a toolkit for transformation, the deck of cards, that each card has a different tool on it. So the first deck, what I did is I took those 70 some odd and narrowed them to 52, like a regular deck of cards. And I had a friend who said, like, when you don't feel like you're playing with a full deck, you can pull a card, right? It was good. It was really good. I since have kind of retooled, the deck, and I created a training program to teach people 3 different techniques for healing trauma. And so I reworked the deck a little bit and added some other tools and took away some other ones. So there's a whole, take 2 or 3 from this deck, and then, like I said, I'll have a couple people draw numbers, and I'll give away a couple of decks too. Okay, so.
Just in case, like, people don't, do you sell the deck of cards?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Well, I mean, just, you know, just in case.
If you take 3 or 4 and pass the rest, or you know, we can just get rid of the whole deck if you want. I've got plenty. So I'll let folks pull 3 or 4 and then see what we haven't covered so far, because we have a few more minutes. How about that?
Sounds good.
As you're doing that, one strategy that we haven't talked about is one that's more mental, and that's related to a very common counseling approach, cognitive behavioral therapy, right? CBT, that says if we start to monitor our thoughts and then repattern those thoughts, we can change the way we feel and the way we act. So that's another mental approach. Pardon?
Seeing a therapist.
Seeing a therapist, yes.
Good.
Yeah, we got to give a plug for our own profession, right? So the act of being able to bear witness or have somebody witness what's happening for us can make a big difference in our lives as well. So yeah, there we go. So however many you want. So as you turn those over and you're flipping through them, what are some ones that we haven't covered yet?
Performing a mitzvah.
Yeah, I have friends who are Jewish, so that a mitzvah is a kind act. So did you know that last week, the week of February 14th, is Random Acts of Kindness Week? Did you know that? So the act of coming from gratitude and appreciation and kindness changes our whole physiology. Pretty amazing. So some spiritual traditions have volunteering, and service. That's about also performing a mitzvah. What else? Any others?
Give yourself a timeout.
Yeah, a simple timeout. So timeout doesn't have to be a punishment strategy. It can be, oh, you know what? I'm just going to take a little bit of a break. I remember when I was in my master's program, I had a roommate who was so structured with how she did everything. I would study for hours at a time. And she would study for 50 minutes and take a 10-minute break, and then study for 50 minutes and take a 10-minute break. And in her 10-minute break, what she would do is clean or wash dishes, or she'd fix her dinner, or whatever it was. So that's how she studied. And I was like, I can't do that. I would study at 2-3 hours at a time, barely take breaks. The one time I practiced that was it was a summer class that I took. It was one of those condensed classes, and I was sick as a dog, and I had an exam. I couldn't keep my eyes open, so what I did was I studied for half an hour and I slept for half an hour. I studied for half an hour, I slept for half an hour. For the 2 days before the exam, I did awesome on the exam. And what I found out after that was that's really how our brain tends to remember first and last pieces of information, right? So we'll just do my hands. So this is a 3-hour period of time. Okay, so if I remember first and last pieces of information, look at this huge chunk that I'm not going to remember. But watch this, half an hour. Half an hour. Half an hour.
Where were you like a year and a half ago? I started this decision after being out of school for umpteen years. Sorry. Stop having at this moment.
That was a big light bulb that just went on, right? So I know that people study in lots of different ways, but kind of think in terms of how our brains work and chunk it down. Study in smaller bits of time. People who use flashcards will, that's a different way of also studying. And that's related to self-care, I think. Anything else from the cards that you're saying? And we'll start to tie up. Working with dreams. Yeah, pretty awesome. It's interesting. A couple of years ago, I met a woman who does a combination of dream work and body work. Powerful, powerful combination. Our dreams almost always, are pulling up what's unconscious. And our unconscious is always processing, and it has stored everything. And it starts to make connections that the front of our brains don't make, but there's still connections. So dreams pull those connections together. Dreams are metaphorical, and what some of the research that I have seen is around using dreams to work with people who have trauma. One of the hallmarks of trauma is nightmares, but nobody's dealing with the nightmares. Isn't that interesting? And yet, it's an extraordinarily powerful way of helping us to heal and process. So if you don't know anything about dream work, start finding out. I could probably do a little bit on dream work tomorrow. I'm seeing some head shaking, yes. Oh, so you're not going to make it. That's all right. We'll see what we can record. So I'm here to spread the word about really finding out more about how to work with dreams. There are a couple of cards in the deck related to working with dreams. Really simple strategies that you may not know really how to do it, but if you work that strategies with yourself, it can be really helpful, and again, really powerful.
That could be powerful with PTSD as well.
Absolutely. Any form of trauma, post-traumatic stress. Yes, one of the hallmarks of post-traumatic stress. Absolutely. And we actually ended up in the training that I went to working on a nightmare. And it was extraordinary. After that training, I had a chance to work with a little girl who had, her mother came to ask me to become a LPC supervisor for her. She brought her daughter, they had just moved like 6 months before, and the daughter was having nightmares. She was having a repeated nightmare about a ghost. And the ghost was, she acted it out. So we kept acting it out until she resolved it. I didn't force it, but that's the dream. That's taking the dream and working with it instead of just letting it be there. It's phenomenal. And I would suggest that you start adding that to your toolbox as a counselor as well. Let's see here, what else? Anything else that are on the cards?
Energy psychology.
Energy psychology, yeah, that's a whole big thing. So that's around working with the different energy systems in the body. There are 3 major systems. I'll be talking more about this tomorrow as well. 3 major systems. The meridians, which is based on Chinese acupressure. So the meridians are energy pathways in the body. Chakras. So the chakras are energy vortexes, centers in the body. There are 7 major chakras. We also have some minor chakras as well. And the last one is the biofield. And we'll do some experiments tomorrow about the biofield as well. But we pick up all kinds of information and we process all kinds of experiences, not just through our minds and bodies, but also through our energy systems. So the systems sometimes get blocked. Our thoughts sometimes get blocked, and our systems will get blocked too. Pretty cool stuff.
One of the most amazing yoga classes I have ever been was one that dealt with chakras.
Yeah.
We did the colors with the chakras.
Yes.
And it was the most powerful thing.
So
and I was so consistent with it because it was just amazing.
So yoga has pulled in information about the chakras
It's one that was designed
specifically for right. That's great.
It was amazing.
Yeah, I'm finding as I talk about chakras that people who have experience, some people who have experience with yoga have know more, a little bit more about chakras as well. But I'll talk about those tomorrow too. All right. So, are we ready for numbers? I'm going to turn this off. Are you ready?